The Asus VG27AQ is the company's affordable take on a 27-inch 1440p IPS gaming monitor, with it sporting an 144Hz refresh rate that's overclockable to 165Hz and support for both FreeSync and G-Sync. It takes on the likes of the LG 27GL850, Gigabyte FI27Q-P and ViewSonic XG270QG for the title of Best All-Rounder 27-inch gaming monitor, and it puts in quite an impressive performance. However, like its sibling, the VG2709QM, one thing this display doesn't do is particularly impress with its design or list of extra physical features. It has a modest all-plastic build with bezels around the screen that are narrow but not sunk into the surface of the screen like you see on some modern displays. You also miss out on any RGB LEDs, a headphone stand or even USB ports. It's just a display, a stand and some video connections. Oh, and you do get some very weak speakers as well. The video connections are your standard array of one DisplayPort 1.2 and two HDMI 2.0. Although fairly basic looking, the stand does thankfully offer a full range of movement options, including two-way pivot, as well as height, rotation and tilt adjustment. And the stand is of course removable, so you can use a 100x100mm VESA compatible mount instead. The on-screen menu controls are very good too. The mini joystick and 4 buttons are easy to locate by feel alone and have a nice snappy response. The menus also respond quickly and have all the options you should need, including full colour balance and sRGB mode, overdrive controls, and surprisingly useful extras like an FPS counter and crosshair overlay. The only slip up is the lack of a gamma adjustment setting. As to the display itself, the key thing here is the balance of IPS image quality, a 2560x1440 resolution, and the 27-inch screen size. It just makes for a really practical, sharp looking display that's great for work and gaming. 27-inch displays with a 1080p resolution are fine for gaming, but can feel a little cramped for most other things, while 4K models involve the headache of having to use window scaling to make the desktop readable. As for that IPS image quality, sure enough it's pretty good. Viewing angles are excellent and overall colour accuracy is very good too. Out of the box, colour balance and gamma are a smidge off the ideal, but this display is still perfectly usable for most things. What's more, its 1200:1 contrast is very impressive for an IPS panel, particularly when compared to this display's chief rival, the LG 27GL850. That panel struggled to get much above 700:1 contrast in my testing, making it look very dull and washed out in comparison to this Asus. Switch to this monitor's user colour mode and it's easy to tweak the colour balance to be closer to an ideal figure, though the lack of a gamma adjustment setting means this isn't something you can fix outside of software adjustments. Still, this display is absolutely fine for all but the most demanding of colour critical work. One thing you don't get here though is any significant HDR ability. The colour range of the monitor stretches slightly beyond the normal sRGB range to around 110%, but it's a long way off the 140% that proper HDR standards require. This is one area where the LG 27GL850 pulls well ahead, though both displays lack the all-important very high contrast to produce proper HDR anyway. It's actually a good thing this display doesn't stretch its colour gamut too much as well, because the sRGB setting doesn't drop the colour gamut to 100% and it destroys the contrast, bringing it all the way down to just 500:1. That sRGB mode aside though, you get solid image quality. But what about gaming performance? Well, solid would again be the word to describe it. The panel easily overclocks to 165Hz without significantly impacting image quality. Average response time of the panel of course doesn't match the 1 millisecond that Asus claims, but according to TFT Central, it manages to average 5.1 milliseconds, which is only a fraction behind the 4.8 milliseconds of the LG 27GL850, which is the fastest display in its class. In use, that small fraction is just about noticeable, surprisingly, but crucially the Asus pulls well ahead in terms of responsiveness when you engage Asus's proprietary ELMB-Sync mode. This is a blur reduction technology that flashes the backlight of the monitor on and off to reduce the perceived motion blur and response time. Blur reduction is a common enough feature, but unlike most other screens that have a similar setting, ELMB-Sync works with FreeSync and G-Sync. This immediately puts this and other Asus screens that have ELMB-Sync at the top of the pile for gaming responsiveness. The only thing to bear in mind is that image quality drops noticeably when the display is running at lower than 100Hz with ELMB-Sync turned on, so it's best to turn this setting off for console gaming. So all in all, this is an impressive display, considering its very reasonable price of around £400 or $400. It has all the essential features, solid image quality and great gaming performance. Set against its chief competitor, the LG 27GL850, the Asus offers much better contrast and much better gaming performance when ELMB-Sync is enabled, while the LG has better RAW response time when ELMB-Sync isn't engaged, and has a higher colour gamut. So which you should choose really comes down to personal preference and where your priorities lie.